chances are by now you've likely heard about or even seen the movie The Iron Claw. I'm definitely intrigued and want to watch it. The film follows a wrestling family dynasty known as the Von Erichs, and they've had an impact here in Texas, to say the least. They're also the subject of this week's interview with Texas Monthly, who, we chat with every week. So we want to bring in Nadine Smith, who has covered the family for Texas Monthly. Nadine, I want to thank you, first of all, for joining us. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, let's start with the basics. For those who may not be familiar with the Von Erich family, maybe they don't know a lot about wrestling, why are they so special to North Texas?
Well, so, now in the modern era, I think most people, when you say professional wrestling, they generally think, WWE, WrestleMania, the glitzy spectacle that wrestling is today. But a few decades ago, the landscape of wrestling in the United States was pretty different. Texas, just in general, was a real hotbed of wrestling, and you had sort of little fiefdoms. You had the Guerrero family in El Paso, you had the Funk family in Amarillo, and you had the Von Erichs in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in North Texas area, who sort of ran wrestling in the sort of North Texas region. The patriarch of the family, Fritz Von Erich, started out as a wrestler in the 1950s and eventually had a huge family. He had 6 sons, and they sort of, both ran the show literally in the North Texas area when it came to wrestling. But the sons especially became just really beloved kind of both hometown heroes and local heroes. They had a very like boy next door sort of appeal.
Yeah, I was going to say, reading your article, I was really impressed by their reach. We are used to seeing, like you said, the famous wrestlers, but reading about it from back then and their progression was really impressive. And I think if you take the movie and put it into the equation here, it really did shine a light on the Von Erich family as a whole, their ups and downs, what they went through. What part of that aspect are you sharing with your readers outside of the movie?
Well, one of the things and one of the reasons why the sort of the legend of the Von Erich family has endured is unfortunately because they suffered just so many tragedies. But at the same time, there are a lot of ups. There are a lot of, they were truly these beloved superstars in a way that, I think people think maybe, wrestling of the 70s and 80s, maybe it was, in church basements and smoky bingo halls, but it was actually even in that pre-WWE era, it was a huge business. They wrestled at Texas Stadium, every year in the early 80s to upwards of 30,000 people. And so I really wanted to, in the piece that I wrote for Texas Monthly, to try to spotlight just some of the great moments and great matches of their career.
Whether you're a fan of wrestling or not, then and now, you're intrigued, unfortunately, by the tragedy, but then you're really impressed by all the triumph. You look at everything that they got to still accomplish, and they did it as a family, which we know can be challenging in any arena. But I want to ask you, we see wrestling as a performance more now, and there was a very famous feud that really defined the Von Erich family. Can you take us through that aspect of their story?
Yeah, I think starting around 1982 up until 1984, really what drove the business of world-class championship wrestling was a feud between the Von Erich boys and the Fabulous Freebirds, which was a group from Georgia, which included the wrestlers Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Rogers. And they were just your real sort of prototypical wrestling villain, just real over the top, showboating, bleach blonde, wannabe rock stars, just really trying to do everything they can to get under your skin. And so the feud is sort of posited as, in a famous promo that Kevin Von Erich cut, he said that it was not just Texas versus Georgia, but filth versus decency, as it were. And both teams were also really some of the first to use pop music in their entrances and to use music videos. The Freebirds, as you can probably guess by their name, would come up to Leonard Skinner. The Von Erichs would use ZZ Top.
And I love that. I love that because the Von Erich's position on that, it's not just Texas versus Georgia. It just speaks to the ego of Texas, and I think that really probably resonated with all of their Texas-based fans. We know everything's bigger in Texas, including our egos. So Nadine, I am so thankful for you breaking down this very nuanced, very intriguing story, especially for people who don't know about it. If you want to learn more about the Von Erichs, you can read the full article. Trust me, you want to read it. It's on TexasMonthly.com. Nadine, thank you again for being with us.